Hey, so today we have Todd McAllister on board. Uh, Todd McAllister has been the Chief Executive Officer of SPEER, the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource, since June of 2019. SPEER heads the charge in Texas and Oklahoma as the regional leader in education and promotion of energy efficient systems, practices, and distributed energy resources that strengthens local economies, improves health and quality of life, and protect the environment. Prior to joining SPEER, Todd was the executive director of the Texas Air Conditioning Contractors Association for more than 18 years, advocating for HVACR contractors and affiliated businesses across Texas. Todd earned his BA in psychology from McMurry University and an MBA from the Jack Welch Management Institute at Strayer University. A proud U.S. Navy veteran, Todd recently retired as Lieutenant Commander, Supply Corps, in 2024 after nearly 21 years of service in the Navy Reserves. Thank you for your service. Todd, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate you offering SPEER the opportunity here to speak before this group of energy leaders. As Gary mentioned, we are a proud member of the TIEEN network that was set up by the State Energy Conservation Office, and happy to support the TIEEN group. I see that Alan is on the call here. Alan Rossiter. Alan was in, I guess, Gary's seat when I first came to SPEER, and so it's good to see you again, Alan. I hope everything is well with you. I titled this SPEER and TIEEN, basically the state of the efficiency world through our eyes. Efficiency, as everybody knows, is changing drastically right now. The actual definition of what is energy efficiency has changed over the last 6 years, almost 7 years since I have been with SPEER. So, from that standpoint, I kind of wanted to cover some of the elements that are taking place in the broader efficiency world here in the Texas and Oklahoma area, specifically with a focus on Texas moving forward. Okay, let's see here. What's the deal? Seem to be having some technical difficulties here. Wait one with me here. We just tested this and everything was fine. Well, Gary, I'm sorry about this, but I'm having some issues here.
Okay, we'll let you work through those issues right now.
There we
Sometimes,
go.
sometimes as soon as someone speaks, it usually fixes itself.
There you go. So here is SPEER. SPEER is short for the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource. SPEER was started in 2011, so this is actually our 15th year anniversary, which we're very excited about. And we have some opportunities coming up for some trainings. And as Gary said, some webinars that focus on what we do as a regional energy efficiency organization. We are the youngest of what are known as the RIOs. All the other RIOs are 20 plus years old, and I have a map here that shows where they're at. Um, you've got the Northeast or Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance up in the Northwest. You've got the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project in the Southwest. You've got us, which is Texas and Oklahoma. You have MEA, the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, which covers the Midwest. You have SEIA, which is the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. And then you have NEEP, which is the Northeast Energy Efficiency Project. We, as an organization, obviously Texas is much different than some of these other RIOs. We, as an organization, most closely align with MEA and SEIA. They have states that are more, I guess you would say, in concert with kind of the political will of Texas, as well as states that also focus on natural gas, not just the electric side of things, which we'll talk about here in just a second. We are a member-based nonprofit 501c3. What a 501c3, there's basically different nonprofit organizations. A C3 is an educational or a church-related, religious related organization. It basically means that we can't technically lobby. So we can do some very small advocacy work, which mainly is around education, but in essence, we're not able to go to the Capitol either Texas or Oklahoma Capitol, and lobby specifically for our position. We usually use some other folks that carry our bucket and carry the water for us. We've got 70 plus members, and they're from a wide cross section of the energy efficiency industry. As everybody knows, the energy efficiency industry is very broad, especially here in Texas, and encompasses a lot of different companies and groups. Our main focus is on outreach, education, and collaboration when it comes to energy efficiency. Our mission is to accelerate the adoption of advanced building systems and energy efficient products and services in the South Central US, which is Texas and Oklahoma for us. Our work is kind of tailored into four different aspects. Policy, even though, as I mentioned, we don't lobby, we do have a policy arm. There is so much legislation that comes through Texas and Oklahoma dealing with energy efficiency, dealing with energy, renewables, those type of items, that we do stay on top of that, and we do produce white papers and educational materials that can be given to legislators and their staffs during the legislative sessions that may help explain items whenever it comes to energy efficiency. It can be very confusing, especially when you're talking about utility programs and some of the things that are out on the market. So, from our standpoint and what we do as an energy efficiency organization, it's important for us to have those educational components into the hands of decision makers. We also have, as I noted in our mission, which is to adopt advanced building systems. One of our other big programs that we have are building code and high performance buildings. We have been contracted in the past and currently by both the State Energy Conservation Office here in Texas, SECO, the State Energy Office in Oklahoma, the Department of Energy, the national labs, PNNL Lab, the Pacific Northwest National Lab, LBNL, the Lawrence Livermore Lab as well, LLN. So we basically have received funding to do a lot of building codes training. So we train not only to the codes that are pertinent, and we will get a little further into this in Texas, but we also train the codes that are of a higher standard and that deal with what you would consider to be high performance buildings and high performance building standards, which are known as HPSs. We also have a robust local governments program that is funded. We work very closely with municipalities, cities, incorporated areas, counties. We work very closely with the COGs, the councils of government, of which there are 20 plus here in Texas, that oversee their areas. We work with them primarily around efficiency measures. There is also legislative components that go with those counties in Texas that are considered to be non-attainment. So they have not met the EPA standard for air quality and NOx and those type of aspects of what they do. We help them with reporting back to SECO and back to the Energy Systems Lab at A&M so that all that data can be developed, and then we can figure out ways to better utilize efficiency measures with these municipalities and these local governments that are in non-attainment areas. And then finally, one of our biggest components also is the communication / convener part of our organization. We do a lot of communication, as Gary said. Last year we did, I think it was 65 webinars throughout the year. We had more than 2,000 people attend our webinars. We have more than 4,000 people a year attend our training programs. And we've got almost 5,000 people set up on our system when it comes to receiving our material about what we as an organization do. That stuff is tailored into just a general SPEER email. We've got emails around building codes. We also have emails around our local governments, and then we have emails around policy, as well as an Oklahoma newsletter that goes out. And there'll be information at the end of this that would allow you to sign up or go to our website and then sign up for any of the newsletters that you might be interested in. Our members, as I mentioned, are 70 plus, and we have a wide variety of members taking part in our organization. They run the gamut from advocacy orgs, groups such as the Sierra Club, the Texas Energy Poverty Research Institute, TEPRI. We've got numerous cities. All the major metropolitan cities are part of our organization. We've got ESCOs and implementers. that do energy service work across the state, either with the utilities or with implementers through the projects that are set up through school boards or through local communities. We've got manufacturers primarily. These are the what you would consider to be the large HVAC manufacturers: Daikin, Carrier, Trane, LG, Samsung, Mitsubishi, Water Furnace. We have a very robust working heat pump working group, which these manufacturers are a part of. We've got trade associations such as the Air Conditioning Contractors Association of America. As Gary noted, I spent 18 years with TACCA here in Texas and grew up actually in the HVAC industry out in West Texas. So very familiar with them. And then we also have utilities. Uh, IOU utilities, the investor-owned utilities. We also have some co-ops and local municipal utilities that are part of our organization. What SPEER isn't? We get this all the time. We know that you guys are anti-natural gas, that you're pushing for electrification, and that you basically want to increase consumers' costs to put that into energy efficiency. That is not exactly true. We are not anti-natural gas. We feel like, as I put down there at the bottom, that there is an all or above approach here in Texas specifically, and Oklahoma as well, when it comes to how we use the resources to the best of our abilities to not only save things like the grid, but also save consumer cost, and give resiliency as well as sustainability back to things like the grid or the natural gas supply. We are not pushing for electrification, although we do understand that some of the measures that we feel like would be important do have an electrification component to it. We are not for a wholesale electrification in Texas. We are very well aware that electrification in Texas is not, or Oklahoma is not going to be something that's going to take place. Natural gas plays a critical role in our state economy. It also plays a critical role in our energy and the efficiency that comes with that. Roughly 40% of Texans have natural gas as their main heating supply. And so we're not looking to get rid of that in any shape, fashion, or form. And that all plays into, as I mentioned, we are not for increased consumer costs to get our point across. We actually would much rather see consumers save money on the back end of items. That disposable income that they have can not only go to help them in the future, but can also help to go to strengthen our economy here in Texas as they spend that disposable income in their local area or even outside their local area. So as I mentioned, we are very, very supportive of what we consider to be an all or above, all of the above approach when it comes to energy efficiency. So what I'm going to talk about today is fairly simple, but it's got some, I would say, somewhat complicated parts to it and a lot of moving pieces. I'm going to talk a little bit about the current state of energy efficiency in our broader SPEER region. We'll talk a little bit about federal things that are taking place, the homes in here rebates specifically, and how those would impact Texas and kind of where those are right now. I'm going to talk supply versus demand and how that plays into energy efficiency. And are we now a dual peaking state? What's the deal with data centers and AI that are moving into our state at a very rapid rate? Talk a little bit about what's next, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions or have discussions moving forward. I would imagine on this call, I don't have to expound upon what is energy efficiency. The simplest form is that energy efficiency is basically the use of less energy to perform the same task. I think over time, especially over the last, let's say, half decade, 5 years, I think there's been a graying and a blurring of line of what energy efficiency is. As demand response starts becoming more a talking subject, as more and more utilities and more technology comes onto the market and demand response becomes more of a player, that is kind of a blurred line on whether or not it's actual energy efficiency. I like to consider it a lot of times to be somewhat a hedge or an insurance policy against things that would be happening in the actual energy market at that point in time. It's basically a snapshot whenever they deploy demand response. It's a snapshot of what's taking place at that time. Then you also have distributed energy resources, which are coming online, and then ADERs, aggregated distributed energy resources, which are also becoming more and more prevalent in our actual broader scope of the energy efficiency world. In general, you think things like upgraded appliances, your updates to your home, your heating and your cooling, weatherization, smart thermostats, and then other items. EE really is more or less it's a shift on the demand curve at the end of the day. What you're trying to do is you're trying to draw down energy at one point, and either that stays at that point, or you then shift what energy you need to use to a different time of day when either rates are lower or there's not as much stress on the grid, which would cause in Texas, obviously, with our ERCOT market, for rates to be lower. But it is a shift. When I first started this, we had what was considered to be the duck curve, right? So as Texans got up in the morning, there was not a lot of energy use as we used it through the day, right? It went up. And then as we came home at night and then we went to sleep, it basically leveled out. So they called it what they used to call was the duck curve on this. So what we advocate for is how do we shift that duck curve to make it more beneficial for our grid, and then also how do we shift that duck curve to make it more beneficial to consumers' pocketbooks in the long run. So benefits of energy efficiency, what are they? They're really, really very simple. It can be a cost-effective, resilient, reliable, and clean way to save money, to reduce strain on the grid, to add to this to add to the sustainability here in Texas, and then lastly, to be cost-effective on the other side when it comes to utilities and what they have to do when it comes to capital expenditures. So the current state of energy efficiency is severalfold. It still remains a low cost alternative to bridging the gap during times of uncertainty. Um, we do consider many energy efficiency measures to be low hanging fruit. You yourself can go and weatherize your home, right? By caulking, by putting more insulation in your attic, by adding a more efficient HVAC system, by adding new windows, by adding new doors, by putting on a new roof. A lot of these things basically help. Now, some of them are not necessarily low cost alternatives. New HVAC system is normally the most expensive purchase that someone will make for their home when it comes to just a specific item within their home. But things like caulk and insulation and those things are something that can be low cost and can actually make a big difference. Um, some of the things that have happened in Texas as to why energy efficiency needs to be a player and remain a player are that capital investment here has stalled over the last 25 years. The fact that our electricity costs remain relatively low in comparison to the rest of the country um, basically stopped, it didn't stop, but it slowed the progression of things being built, right? We've all heard now that we've got a shortage of natural gas power plants. It's because there was nothing to spur them to come here. There was just, it was going to take a long time for them to get the payback on building a facility. And so it just kind of stalled out. Um, that low, as I mentioned, the low energy prices kept dollars away. Um, Warren Buffett came in 4 or 5 years ago whenever they were talking about doing some changes with how things were funded in Texas, and basically said that, give me several $billions and I will build you the power plants. That did not take place, but he wanted kind of the money up front and an upfront assurance that he was going to get the return on his investment, which it has not always been the case over the last 25 years. The last natural gas power plant that even came online in Texas was 2018, which was the Bay Cliff plant, and that was in Galveston. So you think back, it's been 8 years since we've even had really a new natural gas power plant come online. There have been what we call zombie power plants that have come back online that maybe had been mothballed for a while and they have come back online. But that's not new generation. That's old generation that was there that has then been redeployed based on various circumstances. This is not going to solve a lack of supply side resources. Energy, we are not going to energy, I'd say we're not going to energy efficient our way out of where we are right now as a state when it comes to generation. It's just not going to happen. What it can act as, to use an old military term, it can be a force multiplier. It can be something that, when used in concert with other activities, helps to draw down the need for so much power in the state of Texas, and then can offer solutions moving forward. It does offer decreased costs for consumers when paired correctly. And then generally, energy efficiency in the past, there have been some changes over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. Generally, energy efficiency in the past has been bipartisan. LIHEAP and WAP, which is low income funding, and then weatherization funding, those things have been funded by the federal government. Weatherization is a key component to everybody that's involved. If you own a home or you're in an apartment, it doesn't matter. Weatherization has a huge impact on efficiency here in Texas. And every little bit helps whenever we're talking about the drawdown of the power or the need to not build costly infrastructure in Texas to get power to folks. There have been cuts to projects and programs that were set up during the last administration, and even all the way back as far as Bush number two, President Bush number two. Some of the stuff that was actually enacted during that time, and it has been around for 25 plus years, is kind of been cut out of the market right now. And so hopefully moving forward, some of those items may come back into vogue and we may get some more federal funding on those. Demand side energy policies are 100% cost effective. And then spending in Texas relatively stagnant since 2011, while achieved demand reductions have increased. What I'm talking about there are the utility programs. So here in Texas, everybody that's in the ERCOT market, which is roughly 80% of Texans, are part of the ERCOT market, and the 8 investor-owned utilities that are in that market. And you think about things like in Houston, CenterPoint Energy, Encore, SWEPCO, TNMP, Entergy, El Paso Electric is somewhat involved in that, AEP. These are the groups that have utility programs that are cost effective. They are required by law to be cost effective. So every nickel that goes into them, they basically have to be able to get a nickel back. And so these programs are set up to be cost-effective advantages to the consumers. I will note that we do have, many of you on this call know that we do have a tiered structure here in Texas where we basically have a three-legged stool. We've got the generators, which generate electricity. We have the T&D, which would be people like the utilities I just mentioned. That's the transmission distribution. And then we have the reps. So if you're in the ERCOT market, somebody's generating your power, a T&D like CenterPoint or Encore is sending it across the poles and wires, and then the rep is who you're actually purchasing your power from. There is somewhat a disconnect on this, that the utilities, Encore, CenterPoint, those folks, don't actually by law have the ability to deal with you as a customer when it comes to energy efficiency. They'll use contractors to be the ones that are selling those programs. They can put the program out there, they can host the website, but in reality, the contractor is the one that is selling the program. There is very little retail electric provider participation in these programs. We feel like that there's a missed opportunity there and that more reps need to be involved in this to really help drive home the programs that are out there and how Texans that are in the ERCOT and investor-owned utility territories can benefit from energy efficiency. So using proven energy efficiency demand response strategies could cut our summer demand by up to 18%, which is huge. We're talking about cutting consumers' bills up to $15 a month, and that's an average, right? So some people would see more, some people would see less. The biggest thing is that I'm going to have the citations here, that these programs kind of help with the need for costly infrastructure upgrades. As congestion and these type things start taking place on our grid, efficiency can help kind of offset those need for the upgrades right now. It's not going to stop the need for the upgrade, but it can help with some of the congestion. It can basically take that capital expenditure out a little bit further than it having to be right now to be able to get the congestion solved or to get enough power to people within that line, whatever the case might be. But obviously, energy efficiency plays a part of that. It can help that whole process. About 80% of what you consider to be the peak reduction benefits can be achieved at about 50% of the cost, which means that energy efficiency, as we noted earlier, is very cost effective. Normally, right now, for every dollar spent, you save about $8. And that number goes up and down and moves a little bit every single year based on a bunch of different factors. But in essence, when you're spending a dollar, you're saving a lot more. Building codes save. Building codes represent a highly cost-effective strategy to help communities from risks posed by natural and man-made events. I'll talk a little bit more about building codes, but building codes are a big example of how we have gotten kind of behind the curve in Texas and what can be done moving forward to get that back up to what we consider to be an acceptable standard. And then lastly, I have on here that FEMA study found that currently 65% of counties, cities, and 50% adhere to the I codes, and 30% of new construction is occurring in community with no codes at all. A lot of that is because a lot of building has gone outside of the incorporated area in Texas. So if you have Austin and you think 30 miles outside of that, where they decide they're going to build some homes, those homes are not part of the Austin city limits. Therefore, they're built to a different code standard than what would be in Austin. They don't have to be. The builder can still build to the best standard, but he or she is not required to do that if they're building outside. They're actually in Texas required to build to the 2015 energy code if they're outside of the incorporated area. To the best of my knowledge, we're in 2026. So those codes are over 11 years old, plus the time it took to develop them. They're basically almost 15 years old at this point. And there have been a lot of changes in technology around building products between now and then. I asked earlier, is Texas becoming a dual peaking state? And we are. We basically we're right under 86,000 megawatts on our summer peak. Last summer, it was anticipated that we would hit 90. We did not hit 90, thank goodness, for numerous reasons. The weather wasn't near as hot as they had anticipated. Um, Sorry about that. It wasn't near as hot as we anticipated. Um, Also, energy efficiency measures help to bring that down. The biggest component that's what is taking place now is that our winter peak, as you can see, is now starting to get closer and closer to our summer peak. What used to be a very large gap between our winter and summer peak is now basically crunched itself down to roughly 9,000 megawatts, give or take a megawatt here or there. So during the recent storm Firm, which just happened a few weeks ago, they were anticipating us hitting 90,000 megawatts during Fern at one point. And I came back down and it was closer to 85, but we topped out at 77. So it ended up getting warmer than they anticipated quicker, and it didn't get near as cold as they had anticipated at the beginning. If you think back to Uri, whenever they look back on what happened at Uri, had everything stayed online and we not had the issues that the grid had, we could have hit well over 90,000 megawatts during that Uri storm. So if you think back 5 years to Uri and what took place then, we have grown exponentially kind of as a state between now and then. So another Uri event could be even higher than 90, and we're talking, 95 plus when we're talking the amount of megawatts that we need. So Texas very much has become a dual peaking state, which was not the case 10 years ago. And one of the things I mentioned on here is utilities, the IOUs, investor-owned utilities, through their EE programs are required to reduce basically, and this number is not very large, a fourth of a percent of their peak load each year. There are a lot of advocates out there to try to get that to 1% to 2% of peak load each year, which would cost obviously more money on efficiency programs for the utilities. Right now, they're only required to reduce it that much each year, and they do submit reports on that. Why is efficiency critical now? Uh, Growth in Texas continues. Population growth, obviously, we have at one point we were having 30,000 people a month were moving to Texas. That number's dropped a little bit. Data centers are going up everywhere. And then as far as everything else goes, the demand could jump to more than 140,000 megawatts by 2030. That number, I think, is not correct. It's just not, we're not going to get there. It's almost impossible for us to get there just through the build out and those kind of things. But we are going to probably jump over 100,000 megawatts without any problem, if not to 110 by 2030, which is just 4 short years away. And then also, why is efficiency critical now? There's huge supply chain issues. There's a lack of, as I mentioned earlier, a lack of natural gas plants. And right now, with the supply chain issues, you're not going to get steel in the ground and get these plants up within the next 2 or 3 years. It's probably a 4 or 5 year down the line marker. So now we're talking about moving past that 2030 marker before we really even have steel in the ground, and that is turned into a natural gas plant. So how do we mitigate some of that through items like energy efficiency? And then also, how will the current political climate impact the supply chain? So as our political climate, and I made these slides right after the conflict with Iran started, and that has already started to impact the supply chain, most notably through the oil. and now the raising of our gas prices because of the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. So that being said, there's also, political climate plays a lot into how the supply chain moves, and then what that allows Texas to do when it comes to our electricity generation. There's also cuts at the federal level that are affecting programs. There's RECI, which is the Resilient Energy Code implementation projects. Those were cut drastically. There's the Homes and HERA funding cuts. Texas has this, and I'll go into this in just a moment. There's the Home Efficiency Rebates Program, and then the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebates Program. Texas was scheduled to receive about $680 million from these programs, almost split down the middle, 340 and 340. These programs have been cut back. Just last week, there was a House resolution that passed that is now onto the Senate where it will not pass. It will end up being filibustered, and then we'll need 60 votes out of the Senate for it to pass, and it's not going to happen. But in the long and the short is that roughly a third of all of this money was cut, or was scheduled to be cut and asked to be cut through that House resolution 4758, I think it was. Mainly for low income energy efficiency products, and then for the appliance rebates. So what the homes would do, the home efficiency rebates, is it would do upgrades that are predicted to save 20% of the home's energy use. You would get a rebate from SECO, the State Energy Conservation Office, is the one here in Texas who would be running this. It would require an energy audit. It would require income verification for those people that are in a disadvantage or a low income type program. And at least 10% of those funds would have to be allocated to low income or multifamily. So this program has been cut. It won't pass. Texas has its application in. We are waiting DOE approval on this application, which should happen in 2026, at which time rebates would become available for Texans to be able to upgrade their home if they were to see a savings of at least 20% from the upgrade from the modeled savings, or 15% from the measured savings. Things like this are important. These kind of programs need to continue. The federal government already passed these. They're already in law. We don't need to repeal them. We need to figure out how to make them work, and how to make them work specifically for Texans and Oklahomans. And then the home electrification and appliance rebate, or the HERE side, same thing, approximately $340 million. These rebates are provided to single and multifamily households where they can get discounts for upgrades on their appliances, which are, again, expected to save at least 20% of the energy use. It requires an energy audit if you're going to install a heat pump in your home. They just want to make sure that the heat pump is installed properly, that you're going to get the deemed savings from that heat pump, and that all measures are up to snuff. And then energy audits are not necessary for you buying a more efficient refrigerator or those type appliances. There would be an income verification, and 40% of the funds are allocated to what they call DACs, disadvantaged communities. And again, their appliances include stoves, cooktops, heat pumps, and others. So these things are very important. They need to be part of the process here in Texas when we're talking about energy efficiency. And the fact that for lack of a better term, the federal government is monkeying around with the funds, to us is not really copacetic, because this has already been passed into law, and now we're talking about removing these and potentially removing efficiency potential from the state of Texas and Oklahoma. Why is efficiency critical now? Here in Texas specifically, data centers are the big thing, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about energy efficiency here in Texas and bring up data centers. Right now, it looks like the projections through 2030 is that they're going to continue to contribute to rising electricity costs. Right now, data centers account for about 4% of U.S. electricity sales in 2023. That was the latest number that I could find available. And the projections are ranging from roughly 6.5% to 12% in 2028. So that is a huge growth when we're talking about how much electricity these are using. Complementing energy efficiency are opportunities to reduce load during periods of peak demand using demand flexibility. Duke estimated that curtailing demand center loads for just 0.25% of their uptime would free up enough capacity to accommodate 76 gigawatts, and that's across the country. But if you figure Texas and Virginia far outpace the rest of the country on the amount of data centers that are projected to go into those two states. So if you look at this, and let's say that we're basically doing 70% of the data centers, you could take that number and divide it, that you could basically take 35% of that 76 gigawatt, and that could potentially be some savings for Texas whenever we're talking about how much load could be curtailed. And then utilities and state could also implement programs and policies to help spur efficiency and demand flexibility progress, which is a big deal to demand flexibility on when people are actually using power. Potential opportunities always include the efficiency and flexibility targets. These can be mandatory targets, these can be voluntary, or they can be tied to time of use rates. Where you as a consumer are able to use your, let's say, your electric vehicle at 1 o'clock in the morning to charge instead of 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you receive a different electric rate. You're not taxing the grid at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. There's more space on the grid at 1. That helps the whole process and helps the incentive, right, for you as a consumer if you drive an electric vehicle on when you want to charge that vehicle. Why is efficiency critical now when it comes to data centers? It's the largest driving factor of the 140,000 megawatt that Texas has put out is the number that we will achieve in 2030. The other thing is that they're going into many small and rural areas. These areas are not equipped component wise to have a data center that's going to use a ton of electricity coming into their little area. For example, I grew up in Abilene. Google is building a data center about 45 miles to the north of Abilene in Haskell, Texas. The entire county of Haskell has 6,000 people in the county. They are not equipped to be able to, they don't really have energy codes, they don't have building codes, they have a lack of adequate workforce, which means that new people are going to have to come in to build that facility, which means they're going to be using power from the actual little community to help build the facility. They're going to be taking up, trailer space and those kind of things to live in while they're building the data center. So they're going to tax the power grid in Haskell County specifically, as I use that as the example, to a tune that they have never seen before. And because they don't have the same energy efficiency mandates and the same energy efficiency opportunities in Haskell County that a big metropolitan area would have, these are going to potentially turn into problems for these little communities that are taking on these data centers. It also means that these data centers offer a lack of alternative programs that can help drive efficiency through incentives, demand response, or more robust data center efficiency. The data center is going to build itself to the most efficient system possible, right? They're not interested in paying a lot of money for power. So they're going to build themselves the most efficient way possible. They're going to have backup power. They're going to have solar. They're going to have batteries. They're going to have storage. They're going to have all those things. But the communities around that, especially when you're talking small rural areas, do not have those items. So we feel like it's very important for these data centers to play a part in making that rural area that they're in more efficient, either through maybe it's helping to finance efficiency projects, maybe it's helping to work with the utility on their efficiency programs that they have within that small municipality or that small community. There is, however, sufficient energy efficiency and demand flexibility in the US to help offset this AI data center growth if you do the right things and you really start moving now. The largest utility programs provide energy efficiency for a median cost of about $12 a megawatt. While, as I mentioned here, gas plants have a levelized cost of energy ranging from 45 to 108 megawatts. So as you can see, it's much more beneficial for the utility and for us as consumers to have energy efficiency programs within the market as opposed to just directly going to build power plants. Only about 6%, however, of US customers participate in these retail demand response programs that are also available in 2024. Meaning that if I'll use Austin Energy as an example, even though they're not an IOU, Austin Energy has a thermostat rebate that you get $50 or $75 a year to be a part of their demand response. We cut your thermostat back whenever we have issues on the grid or we need to power it down a little bit. From that point, only basically 6 out of 100 folks are participating in those type of programs. And then finally, by 2040, energy efficiency improvements could reduce U.S. energy demand by about 70 gigawatts. We talked about that number a little earlier, according to an ACEEE, which is the American Council for an Energy Efficiency Economy. who puts out a lot of white papers and reports on this. And then deploying shifting flexibility over the next decade, which is a part of energy efficiency, including electrical vehicle charging or water heating, could reduce peak demand by up to 200 gigawatts. Why is efficiency critical now? Well, DERs are distributed energy resources, things like energy efficiency demand response, which we just talked about, where you receive a call to basically reduce your demand or to curb your usage, and then you're potentially paid a profit on reducing that power during that time. Distributed generation, DERs, distributed energy storage and resources, and then EVs and combined heat and power all play a part in why efficiency can be utilized in a better manner here in Texas. The capability of DERs, as I mentioned, is to adjust the demand profiles across different time scales, shifting basically the load so that it falls into a time when the grid is not nearly as congested as it is between kind of that peak time of 11 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, which it has become now here in Texas. And then again, demand flexibility allows, which I consider to be a hedge or an insurance opportunity. It allows a shed component to come with that, that if energy needs to be shed, they could, in a worst case scenario, turn off your thermostat so that your unit wasn't running for a short period of time. We talked about the load shift. The other thing is it also allows the ability to modulate or to balance the power or the demand for reactive power by drawing on this either autonomously or through a response signal from the grid. So all these things tie in. I call it the circle of life. It's kind of like you have this whole Simba effect, right? That all of this plays into each other. How much power is being generated, how much power we need, how much power we're able to shed, how much power we're able to shift. All of those things play into items that come into the actually at the end of the day, what the bottom line is for you and I whenever we receive our power bill at the end of the month. And efficiency plays a big part of that. And then also generate. Distributed energy resources have the ability to generate electricity for on-site consumption through things such as batteries, residential or light commercial solar, all of those things that mean that that can be dispatched at a time when the grid, when they receive a signal from the grid that, hey, we've got issues and we need to reduce the amount of power that's being used. Why is efficiency critical now? Heat pumps. Heat pumps are a big component of our winter peak. As I mentioned earlier, we are very much closing in on a summer and a winter peak. Heat pumps are one way to reduce that through efficiency. Right now, 60% of Texans, give or take a nickel here or there, utilize what we consider to be strip heat. I call it toaster heat because basically what it is like a toaster. It is a heating element within the unit that basically turns on 5 kW, 10 kW, in some instances 15 kW, which is full bore. There is no modulating it up or down. Electric resistance heat, if it's a 5 kW heat strip that slams on because you're using electric heat, that's what it is. This basically is a problem. It is used primarily in Texas in multifamily. Very few multifamily projects have either a heat pump or gas heat. They nearly all have electric resistance heating, which means that every apartment building or apartment complex that you see going up across our state means that most likely that's just adding power onto the grid. We need to figure out a way to get more heat pumps into the market that will help with our grid stability and our resiliency as well. The technology for heat pumps is much more trusted and available than ever. There are cold climate heat pumps now that are working in Maine. I talked to somebody just last week who, during the severe winter storm, did not have to turn on their emergency heat because their home was weatherized and they had a cold weather heat pump in Maine. It was minus 20 degrees outside, and they were basically able to continue to just run the heat pump without it having to have a secondary source of heat to keep the home warm. And then there's also legislation to help limit what this heat strip in new builds. We're working very closely with the Texas air conditioning contractors on that to try to figure out a way to make sure that as these apartment complexes are going up, that they're actually going up with heat pumps and not going in with resistance heating. We do that work through our heat pump working group that we have here at SPEER with the major manufacturers. Wow. All right. I'm right on time, Gary. I can't believe this. What's next? Basically, for us as an organization, when we're talking about efficiency, and I know that this was a very short and very quick overview of efficiency and the efficiency measures that are out there, and there are others, but we want to improve affordability. That's our number one key aspect. The affordability component is a huge thing. Upward of 40% of Texans live in what is considered energy poverty, meaning that they spend more than 10% of their take home income on their power bill. Affordability is a big thing. We need flexibility. We need that load shift that we talked about. How do we move people's loads from right during the peak time to some other time where number one they could potentially pay less, but it also helps the grid and it helps with that costly infrastructure build out because we maybe don't need that gas plant tomorrow. Whenever we're talking about that, it helps with the reliability. The less load that is on the grid, the more reliable the grid is going to be. As we get up to that, as you know, Texas is a pseudo right now energy only market. People bid into the market the day before on what we're going to pay the next day based on weather factors and how much they anticipate will be on the grid. That reliability would help, right? If we did not have as much need or as much call for power. And then again, that all ties into the resiliency so that our grid in Texas is more resilient. We need to utilize and modify utility efficiency programs better to serve the customer bases. Again, I asked the question, how do the retail electric providers, those reps who you actually pay your money to for your bill, fit into that equation? What changes can be made at the Public Utility Commission to address portfolio cost effectiveness? Right now, these utility programs will require individual measure cost effectiveness, which means that pilot programs and you have basically a 36-month time to kind of ramp up a program before it has to be cost effective. It doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room when you're looking at new technologies or new opportunities that may take a little longer to kind of burgeon into the actual marketplace and become a standard offer program for the utility. And then big, going back to the affordability, the disadvantaged communities, how do we better serve those? They many times are left out of efficiency aside from things like caulk and insulation, which insulation is not exactly cheap, aside from caulk and insulation, things like putting in a new heat pump or a new HVAC system or buying a new, more efficient refrigerator or a new, more efficient washer and dryer for a lot of low income and hard to reach communities, it's just not, it doesn't work. So how do we make efficiency programs more beneficial for them so that actually more Texans and Oklahomans can participate in these programs? How do we improve building and energy codes across the region? How do we get these energy codes up from the low standards up into the 2021 and 2024 energy code, which is available, and have more technologically advanced products and services within those codes? How do we get more municipalities to adopt those? And then lastly, more heat pumps, more heat pumps, and more heat pumps into the market to try to get out that resistance heat. Whew, that was a lot. Here's our information, how you can connect with us. We have, again, a very robust social media presence. You can see our website there, the eepartnership.org. There's my email and my phone number. I'd be happy to discuss anything with anybody. And at that point, I think, Mr. Gary, I'm going to stop the share, right?